For the last 15 years, I've been on a quest to discover the DNA of the most successful digital leaders in the world. What makes them tick, what's in their minds and in their hearts. We are sharing deep insights from our world-class CIOs so that you get inspired, can learn and reach your full potential as a digital leader. If you are an ambitious technology executive, then I invite you to join CIONET. Join our community so that you too can realize your ambition.
Good afternoon, Europe. Good day, good morning, US, wherever this call may find you. And welcome to another edition of CIONET Spotlight, where each week we put a digital leader somewhere in the world in the spotlight. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Stuart McGuigan, who is the most recently former CIO of the US State Department. We'll unpack that, but I think there was somewhere around 70,000 employees. Let me just very briefly give a background on Stuart, and then I'll let him leave out all the good stuff that I left out. Stuart, after a graduate degree from Yale in cognitive sciences, started out as a researcher at Honeywell. He then went into Merck, also in the life sciences space, but also as a researcher. Went into Liberty Mutual, where he had an IT role. Group CIO at CVS Caremark, the large healthcare retailer in the US. Then was at J&J, Johnson&Johnson as SVP and CIO. And most recently has now been at the US State Department, which I said had about 70,000 employees. I think that's largely it. I might have left one or two out there. And now Stuart is an advisor to a global management consulting firm in terms of digital leadership, digital roles, the CIO function, et cetera. And we might have a chance to also spend a bit of time on that. Without further ado, Stuart's sitting in southern Florida where it's 80 degrees. I'm sitting in the mountains of Colorado where it's drizzling and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. In Celsius, that's about 26.5. But Stuart, welcome. And thanks for taking a little time out of the sun today to spend some time with us.
Delighted to be here. And that was a pretty good intro.
Okay. Did I miss anything?
No, I think the underlying theme is using data and analytics to try to measure business results and help aim continuous improvement at a company, whether it's serving customers, developing products, or core operations. And so I started on the data side, doing machine learning, AI, and analytics. And then at Merck, was a little too loud and complaining about the state of the systems. And when you complain about something at a big company long enough, you eventually get asked to fix it. And so that's how I got into IT at large corporations, and it really never left since then.
Hey, let's start there. This is just a conversation between two people, and we'll riff it for 30 minutes. But you mentioned you started your career in data and analytics, and it seems like it's all in vogue again. I remember looking at the term artificial intelligence, and it's been around, I think, since 1920 or 1921. I think it's been around 100 years now. Why is it fashionable again? Why you started your career there, and you were talking about analytics and data and AI, some 30 plus years ago. But why is it suddenly in fashionable again? And is it now more important than ever, or is this just a continuum, going back for your career?
It's more important than ever. While you could argue that the methodology hasn't changed that much, we were playing with machine learning in the 80s at Honeywell. What has changed is just the technology that surrounds it, the ability to capture and manage enormous amounts of data, the ability to devote CPU resources to doing the modeling that you couldn't have imagined on a Cray computer not too long ago. So the feasibility of developing these models at scale quickly has completely changed the nature of the use of AI. When I was in AI before the last AI winter, and one of the reasons there was a winter is that we didn't have a lot of real working models. We had a lot of demos, We had a lot of research proposals out there, but we didn't have a lot in production. And that's just totally different today. The challenge is going to be that as we develop all these relatively narrow models in machine learning, how do we generalize so we can extend it beyond, 1,000 specific instances of machine learning?
Right. And it seems like it's obviously now more than ever a wonderful opportunity, but getting business execs, getting their heads around it, I think they intellectually understand it, but how do you break down those use cases where, hey, if you give their short-term focus, right? They're thinking about the quarter, they're thinking about new product shipping. But how do you get them to focus on, I need your attention because this really pays dividends in 3 or 5 years out, but it's going to take some time now. How do you create that context for them?
Yeah, so you're identifying one of the fundamental ongoing challenges of IT, and this dates back to the mainframe era, which is that incredibly close connection with what we're doing in IT to what we're trying to do in the business. And it's still often the weakest link in the chain. The fact that, as you said, we end up in a position of saying, hey, I need some attention, means that we haven't connected what we're doing in the minds of leaders to what's most critical. And so that's the first conversation that has to happen. And it's not a technical conversation. It's the conversation is, what do we need to be able to do tomorrow that we can't do today? Whether it's we need shorter cycle times, we need better reach to our customers, we need more efficient operations so that we can be more affordable. Whatever that business imperative is, that's the anchor. And then that's also the way that we can focus what we're doing on just those things that advance the business strategy and not get caught up in sort of broad technology strategies like we're going to modernize everything. That's great. I mean, let's modernize things, but let's do it in the order that realizes the best business value the fastest. If we're doing that, then what I found is business leaders and even the CFO become your best friend. And one of my informal goals as a CIO was always to get to a point where the CFO said, are you sure we can't spend more money on IT? And the reason they would ask that is they could see the return. And then we had to think hard as IT leaders, what is our capacity? Because we don't want to waste money. We want to produce that return, but get out of the IT as a cost center discussion and get into, what exactly are we doing to advance those business strategies that the CEO and the business leadership think are critical.
That's a wonderful quote. Is there more money we can spend with you, Mr. or Mrs. CIO? That's a great one. Hey, you mentioned faster cycle times. When we spoke the other day in preparation for this call, you were talking about the U.S. State Department doing faster cycle times and delivering code faster than you believe any commercial organization has done, if I understood that correctly. And yeah. I'd like to understand that. That sounds extraordinary. People's reaction are, gee, a government entity that's kind of known. And let me just back up a bit. I said in the opening, I believe you were supporting about 70,000 employees in, must have been 150 or so countries, right? You had about 13,000 foreign service officers, about 10 or 11,000 civil servants, and about another 45,000 local employees. That's data pulled out of public sources, but yeah. It feels like 70,000 employees. I'm guessing the State Department's in about 150 countries. But you were moving faster, you believe, than a commercial entity. Than many, at least many. The ones. Okay. What was the impetus behind that? How did you get that going? How did you sustain that? Help us understand that. That's an extraordinary story. Yeah, so I would put the speed of deploying capabilities of the State Department during the COVID crisis up against any organization I've been part of. I'm sure you could find a technology company that's doing continuous development and deployment, but it was startling. And the thing that was different about this circumstance is it allowed us to focus on some of the things we say are essential in Agile and DevOps, but they're so hard to do. And one of them is minimum viable product.
First of all, that's a horrible marketing term. Whoever invented that term, should be disbanded from coining terms from then on, because who wants a minimum viable car or a minimum viable house? But the key is to focus on developing those functions that are essential to testing or accomplishing the business purpose, and no other ones, no nice to haves, no other great requirements that aren't essential for, in the case of the State Department, putting the various bureaus online who had never been online remotely before. And because it was an existential question, could this bureau do its work at all, given that we couldn't come into the offices? And so that helped us say, we're going to do all of what's essential, but nothing more. So it allowed us to really look at the backlog of requirements and say, what is the minimum viable product? What is the next essential release? So we got rid of a lot of unnecessary requirements, which is a fundamental part of Agile and a fundamental part of Lean. We also, because we were doing just about daily releases of new capabilities, people could be patient. We weren't saying, if your requirement isn't in this release, wait a year and then maybe our next release will have it. We're saying it's not going to be tomorrow, but it may be the next day, or maybe by the end of the week. Hang in there. We're delivering capabilities as fast as possible. So that sort of machinery, without really debating too much about what it was Agile, what was DevOps, making sure we had all the compliance stuff in place, all the security in place that we needed. Matter of fact, improving all those things with multi-factor authentication. But the whole department was ready to listen to us about how to best pack the box for the daily release. The other part of it is when you invest a lot of time in a software release, you get kind of defensive about whether it's good or not. You spend a year or 2 years and millions of dollars, and people start to poke at it, and it's hard to have an objective attitude toward that. But if all you're talking about is what you did yesterday and some of it didn't work, okay, we'll fix it. We lost a day. We'll do it better. And so the ability to really look with open eyes at the capabilities we deployed and how to improve them without being defensive, without too much in the way of sunk cost, allowed us to really be objective and unemotional about what we're doing. And after a short period of time, the groups that were involved in it, and these are incredible foreign service and incredible civil service officers who are really focused on the field, really focused on the over 190 countries and over 280 posts around the world, make sure that they could do their jobs. That's critical to the United States. That all those things came together in a way that I just think it really blew away the leadership of the department, which hadn't seen that kind of pace before. And as I said, surprised me about how quickly we could move. And it told me, government or not government, you get a group of people together who share a common purpose, who are given the right resources, who have the right skills, as they have at the State Department, you can move mountains. And that's what they did.
That's great. And to put a finer point on that, you mentioned the civil service officers and also the foreign service officers. But what about, were there contractors involved in that? Because I think,
Sure.
My own work with federal contractors is they have a scope of work, and if you deviate from that scope of work, they got to go write change requests, and moving them can be hard, particularly in the technical domain. I'm thinking of my time a long time ago with CSC, working in the federal sector. How did you bring them on side, or were they not part of the equation in terms of those daily code releases?
No, we have so many great partners. And so part of the art and the science that I learned a little bit about, at the State Department, is operating appropriately within the parameters of the scope of work. As you were saying, do you have a contract vehicle that lets you do what you need to do? And those things that are properly written, they're more focused on what you're trying to do than how you're trying to do it. So we found there was enough flexibility in the workforce, in the foreign nationals that were employed at the embassies, in our contractors, to get what we needed to get done. I think a lot of progress has been made in procurement and setting up the right kinds of contracts. Whether you're at a government or a big company, to the extent that you can align the interests of your partners with your interests, you get better results. To the extent that you're just aggregating demand and trying to negotiate a lower unit cost, one, you often don't get the outcomes that you need. You don't get the quality you need. But because you're going to a lowest common denominator, you often don't even get the overall expense savings you're looking for. So I think one of the things we had was, I think, much better aligned contract vehicles to work with our partners. And their attitude toward working to us was, tell us what we need to do so we can keep foreign policy, keep our diplomatic efforts going during this crisis. So I didn't really see a hint of friction among individuals. There were some clever things that people had to do to get alignment, but they did it, and the result was astounding.
That's amazing. Wonderful story. Let's look forward. We're coming up on halfway into 2021. There's some daylight. It looks like there's vaccines are kicking in, travel's being lifted. What really needs to be on the CIO agenda for the next 18 months or so? Looks like budgets are tight. A lot of industries have really, been hurt financially. But generically speaking and generally speaking, what does a CIO need to get right, irrespective of industry right now?
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing ahead of us some very good quarters in terms of economic growth in the United States and many parts of the globe. And so I think we're in that position where, as a CIO, you can either amplify or reduce growth, right? So IT can't create business demand by itself, but we certainly can support the operations that are needed to be able to support either product growth, demand of product growth, or services. And the better you understand the business processes you're supporting, and the better you understand end to end where the bottlenecks either are or are going to be as you ramp up demand, the more accurately you can target things like automation, things like robotic process automation, which is I think a phenomenal new tool, but it has to be applied to the right place. And that's sort of good news for IT organizations. If you have a customer fulfillment process and there's 20 steps along the way, and every one of those individuals is looking for technology improvement, that's a lot of work. I mean, you can end up with a tremendous backlog of requirements. But if you can work with the business leaders who own the end-to-end process and say, okay, of those 20 steps, which one is the current bottleneck? And focus on that one and add automation and capacity. And then another one will pop up and focus on the next one. So really taking an end-to-end view of what a business does, understanding something we've all read about in the theory of constraints, which is local optimization actually leads to sub-optimization of the end-to-end process. We know how to say that, but typically we're not organized well to deliver on that. So if we can use that focus on what's the next best thing to do, what's the thing after that, what's the thing after that, we'll find we have enough resources to get the work done. And if we keep that lean mindset, what's the minimum viable product? What are the essential things that need to be built and put in place and delivered against those business metrics? I think we'll find we have enough capacity, we have enough focus. And then once you start on that path and the CEO and your business leaders see that, boy, when I let IT and my businesses really focus on essentials, I get really rapid results. I get results within a quarter. You get results within a quarter, you have everyone's attention within a company, right? And so that builds the credibility. Once you have that sort of flywheel going, then I think you're well positioned to say, all right, let's think long term. Where do we want to be in a year? Where do we want to be in 2 years? And let's start to move things out of legacy infrastructure, out of legacy systems, but in a business intelligent order that prepares us for next quarter or prepares us for 6 months. And I think the sweet spot for an IT organization is that you're working with your business partners to take full advantage of the technology capabilities, to deploy them, improve them on the one hand, but that what you're building today, you're looking over the horizon, you're building things maybe with a little bit on a bet, that are going to be needed, 3 quarters from now, next year from now, and you're doing it transparently, then you've kind of got the best of all possible worlds.
There's a lot of pundits out there trying to figure out the future of work, the future of workforce, and hybrid models. And, we read about it every day. And I'm going to ask you to weigh in on the topic.
Sure.
What do you think the future holds? You've run some very large IT organizations. You think in a year or two time that it's going to look a lot more like 2019, or do you think it's going to look a lot more like 2020? And what's your thinking on the best optimal configuration of an IT organization to deliver going forward? More like 2019, more like 2020, or something else?
I think a hybrid. I think a lot of 2020 is going to stick. And I think there was some historical and legacy attitudes that if I can't see the people working in their cubes, maybe they're not working. And that's never been true for individual contributors, which at the end of the day, people who put their fingers on keyboards and code and configure and deploy, that's the only way value gets added in IT. The CIO doesn't do anything, right? The CIO's only job is to help those people who actually do the work, do it faster, better, more efficiently, be more engaged, be more creative, and really, unlock their potential. Those people, because you know what they're doing. And if you're organized enough to connect it to business value, if those agile teams are creating business value, then you don't worry as much about where they physically are, right? And we've all gotten much better at using collaborative software. We did 5+ years, I think, of maturation at the State Department and using, the various tools, teams, and other things. That otherwise in a few months, because we had to, it was the only way to collaborate. I see that leaving behind capabilities. Now, we will want to be in person for thinking through neat new stuff, getting the team energized. And I think we'll see that come back. But the flexibility that we now have, the ability to have some number of days a week where you don't have to burn 2+ hours on a commute. You get some quality of life back, but you also might get some increased productivity. I think that's really here to stay. And the companies that know how to harness that, maintain their culture, the essential, the intangible things that make them who they are, like a Johnson&Johnson, those companies are going to attract more and more employees, and they're going to keep them longer. And I think that's really what we have to be ready to do. If we took shortcuts in places where we need to either beef up capacity or move to the next generation of cybersecurity, let's do that, because we're not going all back to the office. I think at any point in the future, it's just too much potential with what we've created during the COVID crisis.
Look, you've obviously worked in a lot of industries. Honeywell is high tech, and Liberty Mutual financial services. CVS is retail stroke healthcare. J&J is medical and pharma. State Department, obviously government. Lots of industries. I know you've advised other industries. If you were a young 30-something ambitious IT leader and wanting to make a mark somewhere, is there an industry that you think is going to be more rapidly changing in the next decade that IT is going to affect? Do you think it's a level playing field and it's 6 one, half dozen the other, it wouldn't really matter? Or do you think one, like what AIs and MLs can do to healthcare, for instance, and pharma, human genome, things like that, or is it kind of a level playing field, or do you see a certain industry really automating faster than others at this stage, given all you've seen?
I don't think there's an industry that is going to get away from automating and the pressures of being able to be faster, better, and lower cost. And those all require technology, leadership, and insights. And when I first started as a CIO a number of years ago, one of my recruiter friends said, "Oh, you don't want to do that because there'll be no such things as CIOs in 5 years," and that was like in the year 2000. So, the demise of IT leadership has been, greatly over forecasted. Companies are going to need people who are passionate about the business they're in, that care about the purpose. When I was at Liberty Mutual, the focus of the CEO and those leaders was, when there is a hurricane, when there are fires in California, when there's an accident, how quickly do we get people back on their feet? And that sense of purpose, that sense of societal value. Yeah, it's a for-profit organization, but the metrics included those things that people could get passionate about. So find something that you care about. I mean, I care about healthcare. I care about helping people in crisis. I care about the position of the United States in the world and our ability to function diplomatically. And so I've always been very interested in the business. And I think there's always a place for somebody who cares and understands how value is created by your company, but then can translate that into technology terms. I think that's very secure. You mentioned I've been in many industries. I could tell a story that sounded like it was a plan. It wasn't a plan. If there's something that I look back and think that I did more right than wrong, it was to be open to new opportunities where whatever I brought to the table could add value, in a differentiated way, that I was positioned to do something and help an organization do something that otherwise they weren't doing or couldn't do. I never would have started out at Honeywell and said my goal is to be the CIO of a property and casualty mutual insurance company. I mean, I wouldn't have thought, if you had mentioned that to me, I'm not sure I would have been, thought that was likely. But it turned out to be one of the best experiences I had, because it taught me about providing service in a financial services industry where the product's intangible. I mean, how many products do you buy that you hope you never use? But if you use it, man, you really want it to work. So I hope I never have to use my car insurance, right? But if I do have an issue, it's really comforting to know that Liberty Mutual, and I'm still a customer, is there with people who know what they're doing and can take care of what's going on. So what are you passionate about that you wake up thinking about? And then are you the kind of person who can bridge that gap and lead an IT organization in its essential focus on the business purpose and the business mission?
Hey, two quick questions, and half an hour goes pretty quick, but I suspect you saw things in the cyber world that a lot of commercial entities don't see when you're at Department of State. But what's a lens or a framework or a philosophy that CIOs listening today can take away from, the profile of the U.S. government in terms of cyber? Is there, obviously, without getting into details, but is there a philosophy or a frame or a reference point that it's a useful point of departure for them?
I think there's a huge opportunity to increase the amount of collaboration between the federal government and corporations. And I think creating even rotational assignments and making that work for a career. Someone who's in cyber at a healthcare company who could do a rotation in an agency that has critical cybersecurity needs and expertise. It doesn't have to be the NSA, but boy, if you could do that, you come back with an appreciation that you just didn't have before, but you also bring a way of thinking about problems that can contribute to the capability of the federal government. So I'd like to see more and more of that. One of the things that became very clear to me, both at J&J, because there are different actors who want to get in the IP of a J&J, and then there's different ones who want to disrupt the federal government, is that we've gone through a period of more and more point products being developed in cyber. I mean, there's hundreds of products in your cybersecurity architecture. We need to start bringing those back together, because it's the correlation of all of the activity, the insights you get collectively from all those different points of protection that let you know that something is going on. And zero trust networks is a start to that. It's a little bit more of a marketing term right now than I think a technical term, but the people in the federal government are working on that. That's worth keeping track of if you're in a commercial job, because they're really thinking about how to bring together all the essential information. So if we have somebody operating in the world, we know who they are. We know where they are. We know their calendar. We know what devices we've given them. We know who they talk to. There's a lot of data out there that can be brought together using machine learning to be able to handle the capacity of that data, to be able to say, you know what, this is really unlikely that this person's having this conversation at this time with these people, and to have that autonomic capability to shut that off. I use that as just one example, but that holistic view of all the activities on your network, and knowing, what packets should have a white hat and which packets should have a black hat and be dealt with. That's going to be a very important thing, I think, in the future. And that's an area, as I said, where federal government and corporate can work together, and I think really do some interesting things.
That's great. And last question: what's the takeaway? What's the one nugget? What's the advice you'd give any other listener today that you had in your pocket as a digital leader, and it's always served you well, that perhaps they may not be aware of, or it's a tool you can share that they can put to use?
I think people are aware of this, and I'd say there's two things that go together that are critical, and you can't do too much of either one. The first is absolute business alignment. As far as you can push it, every single activity within IT should be connected to a business purpose. Whether you're changing configurations in a firewall, that engineer should know what they're enabling. They may be enabling a critical partnership with another company. They should know that. It's not just a list of technical activities, because if they know that, they might realize, wait a minute, we already have connectivity that I partner. I don't need to do this work. I don't need to punch another hole in the firewall. Or they may think, I'm seeing a pattern of these. I understand the purpose. We're probably not doing it fast enough. Let me build a software-defined capability to do that. So everything in IT, from the most infrastructure, the most granular, should be associated with the business purpose, the business value you're creating. That takes work, but most people get that. The harder one is radical transparency. That is showing what the good, the bad, the ugly, showing how well you're operating, your reliability, your performance, your cost management. Just be absolutely transparent with your business partners. It's critical to establish trust. But second, some of the fear I've seen over the years is, if we show our mistakes, they won't think we're very good. The sad truth of many companies is they don't think you're as good as you actually are. And when you show them, we had 2% outages, that's not very good. They'll say 2%. I thought you had 20% the way my people complain about it. Be transparent. You get trust. You're starting on a level playing field. And then every step of improvement you make along the way, it's not just claims you're making. It's not just words. It's metrics that tie to the business, because you've got the alignment, you've got the IT performance. And, I could never have spent too much time on that. That's the essential job of the CIO in IT leadership. And just when you think you're being transparent, be more transparent. It pays dividends.
Wonderful. And I remember in the pre-briefing, you said a third one. You said balance extreme humility with extreme fearlessness.
Yes.
So I'll throw that one in as a third one. But Stuart, I want to thank you. Wonderful conversation. I wish we had more time. 30 minutes goes very quick. On behalf of our 10,000 digital leaders around the world, all of CIONET thanks you. So really appreciate your time today, and we'll be in touch.
That's great. I had a lot of fun. It was a fun conversation.
Great. Thanks, Stuart. And see everyone same time next week. We got a full calendar. About the next 6 speakers are all lined up through about mid-June now. So same time next week. Take care all. Enjoy your week.